This one we're doing 1F, a little checkerboard square pattern here. Quick review what I have metric, sheet size A4, that's referring to doing it by hand board drafting, scale 1:1. In CAD we always draw to a scale of 1:1 full scale. I do see that it is 132 tall. Now SQ means square, as you probably figured out on your own, saying that I can use one dimension to give both the height and the width here. Same thing down here. These squares are 15 millimeters square, width and height. Additionally, it says TYP. Same thing here for this offset, this distance of 6 millimeters. TYP. TYP stands for typical. Now that's not so common, or it's not standard for mechanical drafting. Mechanical drafting, they will use things like 4x, 5x. Right here you see 4x diameter 0.62, meaning 2x here, meaning there are 4 locations. This occurs in 4 different instances. 1, 2, 3, 4. Same thing here, 2x diameter 24, 1 here and 1 here, as opposed to this one being a diameter 54. I've mentioned before, we want to keep things as concise as possible. We don't want a drawing overfilled with dimensions. We don't want to duplicate. We don't want to give more than necessary. So we'll condense them. We'll make them concise, and we'll use certain things like 2x, 4x. In this case, it would be 32x or 64x. That's a little much, but here they use the abbreviation typical. Typical is actually more commonly used in architecture construction. Doesn't matter in this case. The whole thing is, did they convey the information to you? It'll be your job as the professional to then make sure it complies with standards. So anyway, that is what SQ stands for, square. TYP stands for typical. We'll address these as they come up. I have here space lines 3 millimeters apart. They're talking about these vertical lines inside of here. So I pretty much have an understanding. It's totally symmetrical, totally square, with exception to the pattern of 4 squares here is a little offset here. Checkerboard tile, not necessarily brick or masonry, but whatever it is you want to consider. So move that over. I'm going to go ahead and do rectangle, REC. And I know this is 132 square, 132 comma 132. And I know that there is another square in here set in a unit of 6 millimeters. I will use the offset O6, click, click. And then I have these little squares. Now, 64 of these, this might be a good one. You may choose to decide to use an array. You probably see that. You might use copy. There's only 8 rows and or 8 columns, so it's up to you to decide whether you want to use array or not. Depends on whether or not it's really going to save you time. Okay, so I'll start off with doing that first rectangle. Down here, 15 comma 15. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and use array, rectangular array. Now, I hit escape. I wasn't done. This is not the array I want. It's all right. An array is somewhat protected, or somewhat of a locked feature. Again, AutoCAD is using vector quantities to draw everything. Vector quantities meaning they are precise. They're constantly using a mathematical formula. That's why these lines do not enlarge or get fuzzy. Those lines are mathematically calculated to exist where they are. If it could, it would show it as a true line that you would not see because there is no width. But enough of that. Back to the array. If I click here, I see that I'm adjusting the distance. Okay, but if I click here and draw it out, I'm adding columns or rows, or taking them away. So that's not necessarily what I want, or it is what I want, but it's a little harder to control exactly the level of detail that I need or want to do. So clicking on it once, my ribbon changes. Up here it shows me that it's a rectangular array. I have columns between total, rows between total, levels between total. I have base point, edit source, replace item, reset array, and then close. Close being same thing as if I hit escape or clicked off of it. So in this case, it's real nice. I know I have 8 columns. Now, nothing's happened yet, but that's because I'm still here. If I tab, I now have 8 columns. I also know I have 8 rows. Tab. Now, a little bit larger than what I need, or it's expanding out into a space greater than my drawing area or my object area. That's because I haven't adjusted here between total, between total. Well, I know that this is a square that is 15 units square. So technically from this corner to that same corner of the next square is 15 units. So I'll type 15 there and hit tab. Now you see the columns are now spaced properly. I still need to space the rows properly, so 15 tab. And there I am. Now double check, I can zoom in, and this appears to be the same square, the same lines. So there doesn't see any offset there. So it looks like my numbers have been correct or precise so far. Yes, I do have multiple lines drawn in the same space. Now, I'm not going to worry about that too much right now, knowing that I have them. You may have noticed on some of the previous problems I did the same thing without deleting them. At this time, that's okay. So right now, I'm going to, what else can I do? Well, I'm fine leaving this as is. Honestly, in this case, I think I'm going to go ahead and go back in here, and I'm going to draw these lines that exist. Now, where is this first line? This first line I could draw here, move it, copy it, whichever, leave it there. Or in this case, I'm going to go ahead and do the from object snap. Click there. I'll move to the right, and I'll type 3, the distance in 3. And now it's up, and it terminates at that line there. Now this I could do an array as well, do a single row of one row of a column of 5, or in this case 4, because the 5th one would then be on this line. I'm not going to do that. I can do offset, and I'll say 3, and then here, 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 or I could have used copy just as easily. Now, this is why I'm not going to array these, at least not at this time, because I don't want them here. And even though I could put a separation distance of 30 to put these here, well, it would still want to put them here. At this time, I don't know that I have an opportunity to offset the next row. So in this case, here's what I'm going to do. Looking ahead, being a little bit innovative, I'm going to copy these from this corner up to this corner. Now I could have copied these over here, over here, over here, these here, here, and here, or at least all of them, and then from this corner to this corner. That's okay. So I'm just going to show you sometimes you have to think a little bit differently. This is where I tell my class, my high schoolers, stand on your head and look at it, or do it a different way. Take a different perspective. Come up with something no one else has thought of, something that might be helpful. Now this is cool. Notice my blue window. I am totally consuming this square, several squares. Not until I get down here am I only selecting those, in this case, 8 lines. Again, the reason is this isn't one square. This is not, also it's not 64 squares. It is a locked or protected array. It is one array of those 64 squares. So that's why this blue window is not selecting any of those. But here's what I'm doing. I can go ahead and array this. Let's see if it works. See if my idea here, trying to save myself time, yet maintain precision, if it'll work. In this case, how many columns are first? Columns are your vertical. How many do I have? Well, I don't have 8 columns because these vertical lines and these vertical lines are technically one object. So I have a pair of columns. So I have one pair here, 2, 3, 4, and that is what it's selected, 4. How many rows do I have? Again, the same thing. These 2 rows are one item. 1, 2, 3, 4, since the actual matrix is 8 by 8. So in this case, I need 4 here. But here's what I'm going to do. Instead of a distance, notice they are extending out and way above. That's because I want these lines here to go over one at 15 over a second one at 30. Here they show them at 36. I'll type in 30. And notice this is correct. That's probably what I need to do here as well. From 45, I'll do 30 and tab. And therefore, I have a finished product. And it turns out just fine. Now, do I need to go back? Do I need to erase? Do I need to explode? And by the way, if you do need to then modify or change something from this array, you want to move or delete just one of these, what you would do is the explode command. Now if I click on the array, it takes me back to the array ribbon. Hit escape a few times. I don't have an array ribbon. You will when you execute or click on to modify something that is in an array. Same with the lines, the rectangular array, the array of the original squares. It takes me back to them, and I can still change. I can change this to 7. I can change the distance between or the overall distance, whatever it may be. So at this time, this looks identical to what I have in my problems in the sheets, or on the sheets. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and just leave this one alone. If you want to explore that a little bit more, we will do other arrays later. There are some other control features, such as, especially right here, edit the source, where I can go ahead and keep this as an array, but I can modify this square to have something else or to have something slightly different, and it'll automatically apply that to the array. At this time, I'm not going to do that. Again, if you want to explore a little bit, go right ahead. I definitely encourage it. But for now, this is all I'm going to do.